Hi, everyone. My name is Daisy, and I graduated Northeastern in 2016. I shortly after joined the Young Global Leaders program, and I've had the privilege to attend various YGL Global Leadership Summits around the world. I am very excited to be here in Miami, and I'm very honored to begin our first panel of the afternoon. So please join me in introducing Josh Weinstein, who is the CEO and Chief Climate Officer of Carnival Corporation. Most importantly, a very proud Northeastern parent. So, Josh, you are...
Can I brag about my daughter?
Yeah, of course, go for it, go for it.
No.
I did ask you before, and she's apparently doing an incredible co-op in Guatemala.
That's right.
So,
That's right. Yeah.
which I think that's one of the best things with Northeastern, being able to travel and see the world, and so it's very exciting.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll talk about it.
So you're a 20-year veteran of Carnival Corporation. Please tell us what kept you gripped to the cruising industry for so long, and a bit about your career path.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to Miami. It has been my home for, other than 3 years in your home country, it was my home for the past 24 years. So for me, why did I stay at Carnival for it'll be 23 years next month? It actually has a lot to do with how I found my path, I suppose, in my career. So I started off as an M&A attorney at Skadden Arps in New York, which is quite an experience. And what it taught me was a lot about how to think, how to act, but it also taught me what I liked and what I didn't like. And what made me happy and what didn't make me happy. And what I realized was there was a lot of folks out there that get a sense of satisfaction out of being a trusted advisor to somebody else. Could be a lawyer, could be a banker, could be an accountant, and you really enjoy providing that advice and counsel to somebody else. And what I always found was, man, we do a deal, a merger, a financing, and we did it for the clients, and the clients were happy and walked away. And I wanted to be the client. I wanted to build something. I wanted to have a vested interest in some other kind of purpose, but I didn't know what, and I didn't know how to get out of doing what I was doing. So we moved down to Miami, my wife and I. She is from Guatemala. We met in college a long time ago, and we knew we'd wind up here. So I ended up doing the same thing down here for the biggest firm one here. And very long story, I'll try to condense it. Not happy, not feeling it. And there was a want ad in the paper for Carnival, looking for an in-house attorney. And they wanted somebody with more experience and wider experience and more years. And my wife convinced me to apply. And I knew nothing about cruising. No, I'd been on a cruise, didn't know anything about Carnival. And I submitted my resume on a Thursday night, and on Friday, they called me in, interviewed me, and gave me the job. And as part of it was a 40% haircut on my compensation. And after checking with my wife, she said, "Yep, yeah, you're miserable, do it." And I did. And within a week, what was amazing was it was everything I didn't realize I was going to love, and I've been missing my whole working career, because I was part of a team that was building something. In this case, it was cruises. And I was just happy with the different ways of working at first. And then after a few months, I took my first cruise. And I realized, looking around and experiencing myself, my job is to make people happy. That's it. That's our job. It is to create unforgettable happiness that people can tap into, not just in the moment, but for decades, and think back to what a great experience it was and how happy we made them feel. And even though I was a lawyer at Carnival when I started, I could trace everything I did to ultimately making the company go, making the ships operate, supporting them so that they could do that job. And so I loved it. I loved it from that moment on. And I did the legal thing for, Do you want this? Do you want me to tell you them? I don't even know what you want to ask me.
I could, and let's just a brief summary of how you got to CEO.
Okay. All right. So I did, so I was a corporate lawyer for about 5 years. And then there was a bit of a management shake-up movement back in 2007, and the treasurer spot opened up, and they went on a big search. And after about a month, the CFO asked me if I was interested in applying. And can I swear on this phone? I don't know if I could. But I was like, "Are you kidding?" And he said, "Yeah, look, we've worked together a lot. I know you. You went to Penn, right?" And I said, "Yeah, liberal arts, political science, not wordy, no accounting, no finance, no economics." And he said, "Well, you could learn it." And so I did. And I became the treasurer right before the financial crisis started, November of 2007. So I did that, learned on the fly. I had a great mentor in the CFO. And I did it for 10 years. And as I did it for 10 years, the CFO grew my responsibilities. So what started off with just strategic treasury, debt, and derivatives, it became operational, and then it was tax, and then insurance, and then financial planning and analysis. And that was his intention, to grow me. I think I also helped take some load off of him, but he claims it was just to grow me. And then after 10 years of doing that right here in Miami, the then CEO called me into his office one day, and it was like deja vu. He's like, "Hey, look, got some ideas about what you could do next," and he gave me a couple of them, and I kind of maybe, and then he said, "Or you could move to the UK and run our UK operations." And again, if I could swear, are you out of your mind? And he said, "No, you'll do great." And so my wife and I talked, and we did that. So we moved to England for 3 years. And I think that to this day, it was still the best job I ever had. Being able to run an operating unit and just own the P&L and roll your sleeves up. And I think for the first time in my career, it was certainly when I realized I was in a real leadership role. That, I had to talk to, at the time, 15,000 people worked for me. And that was from 14 people to 60, and then being to 15,000. And I realized my job was not to do a lot of work. My job was to help create a vision and then just support people, figure out how to improve the culture and improve the tools that they have, and then just try to keep us moving. And so I did that for 3 years, and we loved it. And my kids were pissed off when we moved over there because we were leaving their friends, and they've been more pissed off when we came back, which is great, which is the way you want it. And then in March of 2020, right as the pandemic was starting, they brought me back ostensibly to just help manage the company's cash, given my background, keep my job. I'll go back and forth between the UK and the US for a few months, no big deal. And then we realized what COVID was, and I got stuck here. And so we managed to get my wife to scam me over. And after a couple of months, I became the COO. So I was the COO effectively during the pandemic, during the crisis. Everybody's got their COVID stories, and they're all pretty dramatic. And I think the cruise industry, and certainly we have plenty of those. So I was able to do that for 3 years and help lead the kind of the wind down and the pause and then the restart, which was fairly dramatic. And then about it'll be 3 years in August when they asked me to basically take the reins.
And how would you define leadership now that you're in that role? What's your definition?
I don't think you can boil leadership. I don't think I can't boil it down to a soundbite, but I would say that very much the role of the CEO is certainly not to command and control, right? That's probably what it was 25, 30, 40 years ago, but it's too complicated a world, and we're too complicated a business. And so my job is to provide support and guidance and vision for my team and the organization overall. It is no 2 days are the same. Mm-hmm. And so managing stakeholders, external, internal, I'm a big proponent of having purpose, having values, having long-term goals. Pardon me?
A good culture.
A good culture is a culture beat strategy any day of the week. if you do right by your employees and you figure out how to make it an environment that is truly inclusive and people feel like they can be around the table, speak their mind, challenge, we'll all be better off. And so I think just trying to live that is a huge piece of being a leader.
And how many employees does Carnival have currently? How big is the group?
160,000.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes.
And do you think, I mean, it has been your experience, but what's your opinion on, in order to achieve a role of leadership like a CEO, do you think that, you know, being in the same company, being hyper-focused, you know, having an understanding of all aspects of a business was the key to achieving that role? Or do you think it's also possible to achieve a leadership role going from business to business?
So it was certainly possible. Absolutely. I would say I truly did have the good fortune of having some amazing folks to learn from and to be able to lean on. I mean, my bosses over the years are some legends in the industry, and they wanted me to succeed and grow. And so I think I'd say some keys for me, and so I would assume they could be keys for anybody. One is I always loved my job once I came to Carnival. I was never looking for the next job. And I see that with people now. You know, you can tell when folks are doing the time because they're looking for the next thing versus are they really passionate about what they are doing and doing it well, and focused on that rather than trying to figure out what the next step is. I was fortunate because I was happy in my job and I love my job. And so I actually think that that's a real correlation for everybody who's looking to how they want to progress their career. Find what you love, because chances are you'll put in the passion and the energy and the effort, and people notice that. I think moving from different silos within a corporation, if you stay within a corporation, is really, really important. If I had stayed in legal or if I had stayed in finance or operations, I wouldn't have been able to experience things from different perspectives and vantage points. And so I think that that's quite useful. I'm reading a book right now where they kind of did a data-driven analysis of CEOs and where did they come from and what was the that mix between internal, external. And I think in the population they looked at, which was like 2,000 CEOs over a 20-year period, something like 75% were promoted from within, which I think makes sense, right? I mean, and if you're a company, and if you're the CEO, I want my replacement to come within.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of my most important jobs is talent management and succession planning and getting the next level and the next level and, you know, down ready and helping them grow. So I think that's a sign of achievement when the CEO can get replaced ultimately with somebody from within. And then when you look at the people from within, it is a mix from operations and finance and business units versus corporate. So the more you can do it, experience from different vantage points, I think the better off you are.
Okay. Moving on slightly. So the cruising industry now is doing really well, but when the pandemic hit, that was not the case at all.
Not fun.
No. And well, your executive comms person put here, your company was the subject of a Harvard Business School case study, which I'm sure Northeastern has just a good study.
Yeah.
But they were studying, you know, how you navigated through the global pandemic.
I got to read that set on because I haven't read it.
What can you tell us about leading the company through the pandemic? You know, what did you do?
Before I moved out from the UK, this was in January, towards the end of January, and because I led two brands in the UK, P&O Cruises and Cunard. You might know them. Hopefully you do. And my people have cruised. Just raise your hand. Oh, it is pretty good. That's very good. And so in January of 2020, we had in our fleet of that group was about 14 ships. Probably about 6 of them were on world cruises or exotic cruises. So they were over in either India or the Far East, getting to Australia. And so if you remember the pandemic, that's where it started, and then it started drifting over. And I remember talking to the CFO at the end of January from England. I was calling him in Miami, and we were feeling it already. We were feeling it over there. I mean, it was getting difficult to operate country by country as things were confusing and nobody understood what this was and how it was working. And I said to him, I said, David, this could be pretty bad. And he said, how bad? And he's a finance guy, so I knew what he meant. And I said, I don't know, maybe it'll cost us like $1 billion. And he paused and he said, that's okay. We can handle that. And we were an A- rated company at the time. And I was so wrong because we actually ended up not sailing for about 16 months, which basically means our revenue went from about 17 billion, 18 billion to zero. And so how we managed through the pandemic was cash preservation, wind down, hibernate. And so for the first few months, it was, how do we safely get 300,000 guests and 100,000 crew members home? And some of this had to do with the stigma of cruise. I remember it very well. It was unfounded. It was unfair. I'm biased, but not about that. COVID went on, even though cruising stopped. But there was a lot of concern, and which made our lives pretty difficult as far as being able to get people home, particularly our crew members. And so we had to spend a lot of time sailing them around the world, basically getting them back to the Philippines and India and Indonesia. And then I'd say one of the hardest things about one of the hardest things in my job during that time was trying to convince people internally, wait.
Be patient.
Be patient. I mean, my colleagues at the time are the presidents of Carnival and Princess and Holland America and the other two brands that I mentioned and more in Europe. And their whole mentality for getting to where they were is, we can do this. We can do this. I can help make this work. And I had to be the black hat guy that said, that's just going to waste money right now, right? We don't know when or how we're going to restart. And it's ultimately not up to us. And so everything that came through the news of, I wear an Oura ring. Do you remember when they talked 5 years ago that this could actually tell you if you had COVID? I had said, we're going to get 100,000 of these and put them on every guest. I mean, you name it. And all that would have done would be spinning wheels for the sake of spinning wheels, instead of just saying, right, be patient. We can focus on some things behind the scenes that can help us in the future, but there's nothing for us to do right now other than keep our people safe and preserve cash so we can come back. I mean, our debt went from 12 billion to 36 billion.
Wow.
All right. Now it's back down to 27. EBITDA's higher than ever. It's all good. But we didn't know it through the fizzle round. So it was a pretty trying time.
And if you, to give personal advice, if there was to be another pandemic of some sort in the near future or long future, or never hopefully, but if there was, what would you say your top kind of 3 go-to action points would be for the young global leaders here and how to manage a crisis situation?
So I think there's internally, when in a corporation, I'd say, there's no such thing as too much communication in that setting. I think the tendency for people to just act in silos can't happen in a crisis, right? It's got to be the opposite. So you need organization, and you need free-flowing communication. So there's plenty of companies that are just like us. We have break glass in case of an emergency. What is our structure? Who's at the table? What are the lines of communication? And then you work from there. So I think that's one. I would say 2, it's very, very hard to try to differentiate between when you're operating in crisis mode and when the crisis is over and you have to get back to running the business and letting others manage pieces of the crisis. The pandemic was fairly unique in that every day was a crisis for months. We learned a lot about that. I think we learned in retrospect when we probably could have holistically taken a step back and said, wait. We're operating in crisis mode right now and we shouldn't be. But we just got in the cycle and we couldn't break it. So I think maybe having somebody sit around the table trying to think outside of the current situation would probably be quite useful as well. which will make its way into our playbook the next time.
Okay, very interesting.
Well, let me tell you one other thing.
Okay.
Don't think you can prepare for a crisis like that. No matter what you do, or like any black swan. We did back in 2014, we did an enterprise risk management exercise around pandemics. And the exercise, when we did it, I was a part of it as a treasurer on the financial side. We thought an extreme case was $4 billion of impact. We weren't even close. But then we came up with an operational plan with the operations about what do we do in the case of a global pandemic. And I took that out shortly into the crisis, and I literally just started laughing because I'm like, oh my God, this makes no sense. This doesn't work. So don't overthink in advance that you have the answers to how you can deal with those things. Very much you're going to learn as you go. You can drill, you can practice lots of different things in different ways to get muscle memory on how to react, but not a plan.
Yeah, you need to be agile.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
And perhaps also agile on the next subject, which is sustainability. Obviously, as a global corporation, you are liable for sustainability regulations across many different regions, different countries with different rules from the US, Europe. It's very different. How do you manage adapting and complying with all of the sustainability regulations that Carnival has to oblige by?
Yeah. So because our ships are global, we are literally just subject to pretty much global regulation. And we're not in the business of thinking about how do we get to the minimum standard ship by ship, place by place. It's not the right thing to do, but it's also not efficient. So we basically set our bar at the highest regulation that you can possibly have to deal with, and then work from there. Now, there's lots of different ways that we can have an impact on the globe when it comes to sustainability. Now, clearly, carbon for us is the biggest impact we have, and so the biggest impact we can make on our own operations. And so we have been maniacal for years on using less, consume less. If anybody tells you they know what the answer is to net zero, they are lying. It doesn't exist yet. But what we know is, number one, if we use less, if we consume less, it's better. It's better for the planet, and it's better for whatever the answer ultimately is. When you're dealing with moving a ship of 10,000 people, that's 225,000 gross tons. If you use less, that's going to be good for the answer, because something that scale is going to be super hard to get to net zero. And so we actually, Carnival Corporation, we peaked our greenhouse gas emissions in 2011. We are 36% bigger today than we were in 2011, and we emit 10% less greenhouse gases than we did in 2011. We are maniacal. Thank you. We are maniacal about figuring it out. Use less. And it's a combination of technology, new ships replacing older ships, and like driving a car, our itineraries. Go slower, go shorter distances, you use less. And we have targets that require our brands to do that every single year so we can keep making progress. We R&D like crazy. We were the first with LNG, which is not the answer, but it's the best we got right now. 20% of our fleet's on LNG. We were the first to do it. We've got 10 ships in operations using LNG. And I'll stop talking about carbon, but it's not just about carbon. That concept of using less, doing less impact on the world is kind of across our stream. So food waste, we actually have 44% less food waste per person per day today than we did in 2019. It's because we are desperately trying to figure out how do we consume less throughout the whole process. We generate about 90% of the water on board through reverse osmosis from seawater. We don't try to take natural resources from land. Sometimes we even give water to our local destinations if they have a time of need. How do we make sure we are trying to build sustainability? And it is not just altruistic because I love my family and my kids and people in general. We save money. Right? Sustainability also has an amazing impact to make the business more sustainable. So it serves us well, and so it's part of we have 5 long-term goals in this company, and one of them is based around sustainability. One's based around people, because those 2 things are really what's going to drive the future.
Sustainability has to be financially viable.
It does.
And so, it's a great case study from Carnival that you're actually reducing your costs. So there you have incentive to be more sustainable. And I found it very interesting, actually, when I read your title. You are CEO and Chief Climate Officer.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very interesting that the company would give you that title as well, often with a topic that's kind of disregarded sometimes. And so to set the tone at the top with you as the climate officer, I thought that was fantastic. And do you, in that role, having a dual role, do you have 2 teams that manage this, or is just everything within Carnival around sustainability, so your decision-making is streamlined? Or
both. I mean, basically it's built into the foundation of our operations. We have specific functions that have more of a focus on forward-looking, how do we help the operations, find better solutions, find better ways. And then we have a risk committee on the climate side that really tries to think about 30 years out, how are we future-proofing our business, not just from the impact we can make on the environment, on climate, but regardless of what we do, climate's going to change. And are we building our business in a way that is sustainable for whatever that future world is in 20 to 30 years? So it's, I know we're in a pretty weird time right now in the United States about how people are talking about things and maybe deprioritizing some things that were more maybe in vogue, a year ago, 2 years ago. I do think, I think the U.S. is pushing a little hard on deprioritizing that, but I think Europe was too hard to begin with. I think Europe's insane. I tell that to politicians all the time. They are creating a set of requirements and rules that are not only not achievable, but they would bankrupt the populations, and they would move resources from being able to have people be able to make a living for their family and do the right things in that respect, and getting to net zero for as fast as you can without regard for anything else. And I think when you get the right people around the table, which is a scientist, which is, folks in commerce, folks in all aspects of life, you actually get to the right pace and the right middle ground, which isn't to say we shouldn't push ourselves, but I'm such not a fan of setting targets that are just not achievable. And you see governments now starting to push them further and further along. It's because I don't think that they were realistic to begin with, and there were politicians trying to make statements instead of something, bound in science.
Yeah, and it goes back again to being financially viable, and if companies can do it. And obviously Carnival has a huge economic impact as well as a sustainable footprint. And so when you go to places, your guests, your crew, it's a huge economic impact wherever you go. And you have a new program called Celebration Key in the Grand Bahama.
Yes.
You just talked a little bit about that, and how do your partners on the ground, especially if you're going to small islands, or how do they adapt to working with such a huge corporation?
Well, so we've been around for a long time, for 50 years. So these communities are not new to us. Celebration Key is a new destination that we are building in Grand Bahama, and it's going to be amazing. I'll try not to go too commercial on you, but it's going to be amazing. And but we're building this effectively with the population of Grand Bahama. We've got 500 folks doing the construction work right now from Grand Bahama. This is ultimately going to lead. It's a huge port facility. It's pools. It's beach clubs. It's everything. It's going to be, I want to say, something like 700 new jobs for people living in Grand Bahama. We estimated, we did this with a economic impact study firm. Our investment, which is about $600 million to make this new destination experience, we believe is going to lead to $10 billion of economic impact for Grand Bahama over the next 20 years. And we are actively engaged with the governments to make sure that we're doing things as thoughtfully as we can with making sure that the community comes along with us, which doesn't mean we can give jobs to everybody because we don't have that many jobs. But what we have, we're trying to, as best we can, to give to Bahamians. That's a huge scale. But we go to a lot of places and we've got great relationships with folks all over, particularly developing world, where we learned during, one of the things we learned during the pandemic when we stopped cruising was, how much we need to cruise to survive, but also these destinations, how much of an impact we actually can make in their economies and for their citizens. And we were some of the first people back that were able to get to some of these islands, which was fantastic, which was amazing for us and for them.
I think that's a great place to end, and we can all hopefully go and visit Grand Bahama one day, maybe President.
Racing Key open July 2025.
Maybe we can do a next summit, Grand Bahama, so on the list. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.